India and the United States, two global economic powers, were expected to strike a trade deal before the July 9th deadline. But India held its ground and chose not to sign under pressure. The message from New Delhi was clear: deals must be mutually beneficial, not driven by deadlines. The central issue remains the 26% reciprocal tariff imposed in April. Both nations are negotiating ways to eliminate this tariff and smoothen trade flows. But key differences have delayed any final agreement. India's demands are rooted in protecting its domestic interests. The agriculture and dairy sectors are politically sensitive and economically vital, employing millions of people, especially smallholder farmers. India has long-standing concerns about genetically modified products. There are fears that imported dairy items might originate from animals fed on blood meal, something culturally and ethically unacceptable in India. Additionally, India is wary of importing genetically modified corn and soybeans, which could disrupt its domestic industries, particularly in states like Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. Indian millers have also expressed concerns about using GM corn as ethanol feedstock. At the same time, India is pushing for better access to the US market for its labor-intensive sectors like textiles and footwear. It seeks lower tariffs on these goods, similar to what the US offers its free trade partners. India also wants zero tariffs on electronic goods, particularly iPhones, a large chunk of which are now manufactured in India. It wants assurance that these goods won't face additional duties in the US. Steel, aluminium, and auto components are also high on India's priority list. The removal of extra US duties and a commitment that no new tariffs will be imposed are essential for New Delhi. India is also seeking the tariff advantage over China, a steady differential of 10 to 20%, to stay competitive. This would help Indian exporters overcome structural challenges like infrastructure bottlenecks, high logistics costs, and steep interest rates. However, this advantage hinges on US policy toward China, especially in sectors like rare earth elements. China's dominance in critical minerals has become a concern for both India and the US. In fact, at the recent Quad Foreign Ministers meeting, a joint critical minerals initiative was launched to diversify and secure supply chains. On the US side, the pressure has been on India to open its markets, particularly for American agricultural exports like apples, corn, soybeans, and dairy. The US also wants India to scrap restrictions on genetically modified food imports. This push is based on a report from the US Department of Agriculture, which predicts that as India's population and per capita income grow, its consumption of milk, eggs, fish, and meat will rise. That would increase the demand for feed, opening new opportunities for US corn and soy exporters. The US is also looking to divert its agricultural exports from China to India. With a decline in corn exports to China, once a $5.2 billion market, the US now views India as a promising alternative. Despite these differences, both countries agree on one thing. They aim to double their bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030. There are areas of alignment. India is already ramping up oil imports from the US with a 270% increase in the first 4 months of 2025. Defense and technology cooperation is also growing, largely driven by shared concerns over China. There's also movement on the GM foods issue. A Niti Aayog paper recently suggested that India could import GM maize and soybeans, not for direct consumption, but for industrial use, such as ethanol and oil extraction. The byproducts could then be exported entirely, reducing domestic risks. In fact, importing duty-free raw cotton from the US could help India's own textile and apparel exports to grow further. In 2024, India exported over $10 billion worth of textiles to the US, a figure that could rise with better supply chain integration. So, while a trade deal wasn't signed by the deadline, the conversation is far from over. Both nations remain committed to strategic and economic cooperation. For now, talks are paused, not abandoned. As India said, all possibilities remain open to